And I'm delighted that alongside Sharron Davies now is Caroline Downey, education reporter for the National Review, who has taken on already many in America over such issues. And a very good evening to you, Caroline.
Thanks so much for having me. Great to be with you.
Yeah, well, look, it's good to have you with us here. And some of the nonsense that you've had to write about when it comes to everything from senators to people who feel that they know more about sport than you do, when there is obviously, for many of them, no thought about whether there should be a level playing field or not.
Right. Well, the UK is very familiar with this, but in the United States, it cannot be overstated how pervasive male invasion into the women's division of many sports, from niche sports, extreme sports, strength sports, even, mainstream high school basketball, just how serious it really is. And like you said, the adults in the room from the governing bodies, such as the NCAA or, any of the overseeing organizations, but also the politicians, the congressmen, the senators, who are supposed to be calling a spade and saying, this is not only unfair to women who have fought their entire lives for the right to competition that is on an equal playing field, it's also dangerous and it's not safe. And we've seen this in volleyball. I covered the case of Peyton McNabb, a North Carolina high school volleyball player who suffered a concussion in addition to physical and more emotional trauma because she was pummeled in the head by a projectile spike by a male on the opposing team who she did not know was there. And then there was French Canada, I interviewed a boxer who was set to go against a male in the ring the day before she found out, not because the organization informed her, she had to find out through some informal channel that she was set to face a man with physical advantages that far exceeded her own by birth. And she didn't give her consent, so she had to pull out at the last minute. And so the wool has been pulled over women's eyes, and they're losing titles, they're losing trophies, and much more. This is heartbreaking, but why is it that governing bodies, with all now the science out there, just taking, I don't want to call it the realistic view, but the only view? Right, well, I think they're afraid of liability, but I think what we're seeing with just the gender story across the board is that liability is the onset will be delayed, and it's going to come from the opposite direction. This is producing an army of victims, women who feel like they've been robbed from. Their athletic opportunities have been stolen from them. And also, like I said, they may suffer injury, the consequences of which could haunt them for their entire lives. So while all these governing bodies are trying to hedge their bets by setting testosterone limits, for example, for male participants, they think that's the middle ground. They think that's the solution, but it's really a Band-Aid and it's a cop-out because let's be real, that will never neuter a man's physical advantages. That will never change the muscle mass that they are born with. That's in their very DNA. All it will do is, kind of equalize the hormone levels, but they've never really appealed to science to show that somehow makes the playing field fair. No, look, we completely agree with you. And Sharron, with this, I mean, this is quite scary, really, isn't it?
Well, I mean, the insanity of this is, let's go back to the Leah Thomas situation again in the NC2As, because obviously that was brought up, which is the college championships in America. So they set Leah Thomas's testosterone levels at 10 nanomoles. The average female doesn't even make one, even an elite athlete. So Leah Thomas was allowed to reduce their testosterone to 10 and still carry on. And then here, just to add salt into the wound, if a female athlete was caught with, any form of synthetic testosterone in their system, which even that brought their testosterone levels up to 2 or 1.1, they would receive a 4-year ban. If Leah Thomas was caught with more than 10, bearing in mind there's no official testing system in place either, but should she have been caught, she would have had a wrap over the knuckles and been told to leave the sport for a year. So at whatever level you look at this, the unfairness is just extraordinary. It's just constant in every single possible direction. There's no way that you can square this circle. It's just not possible. You know, there are things like Q angles, which is the angle between your hip and your knees. Again, that never changes. You know, it's always the same. If you're male, it will be it's what you are. The simple solution to this is to bring back sex screening. We had sex screening. In fact, I had a sex test in 1976 when I competed in the Olympics when I was 13, 100 years ago. And it's the simplest thing in the world. It's a swab to the inside of your cheek. It's once in your life because human beings cannot change their sex.
Yeah.
So we have a female protected category and we have an open and inclusive category where everyone is welcome to come and compete. And if that's not good enough, then the trans community need to organise their own events if that's what they want to do, with the help of all the governing bodies, you know, to say, how do we help you create these leagues like they're trying to do in boxing or whatever. But this is all about a fair environment for people to be able to compete. I think one of the most heartbreaking things that I had this summer, Mark, was parents ringing me up of primary school children and saying that primary schools across the whole of the UK are now having co-ed races because they don't want to get stuck like a rabbit in headlights, and not a single little girl is winning a race on sports day in primary school. So what message are we giving our kids, our young girls? We're telling them that A, not worthy, and B, they're not good enough. And it's horrendous. Yeah,
and with that in mind as well, Caroline, you know, I always hear now a lot about what role should a medical or psychological assessment play in determining the eligibility of the transgender athletes in women's sport. Surely we've got to be looking at the women in women's sports and worrying about their mental health.
Well, yes, absolutely. I mean, to Sharron's point, Mark, young women school age will be deterred from entering sports altogether because of what's happening with these scandals. I mean, they don't feel like they have a chance anymore, which is so ironic considering that feminists did make these strides after a lot of tireless effort. It's over so many decades, and now it's all being regressed. It's all being unwound, you know. And the other point about the medical examination is that the problem is across these sports, there is no unifying dictate saying this is how you qualify. If you are a transgender applicant, there is no one policy. They all have different rules. And so some governing bodies for certain sports, all you have to do is declare that you are a different gender identity. You don't have to demonstrate that you've undergone transition or have received surgeries or procedures. Some of them don't actually have testosterone requirements either. So it's really open season across the board. And there needs to be some sort of, I would argue, for the United States purposes, the Supreme Court has to weigh in.
Absolutely. I mean, I think what we also don't talk about is, and you say that women have made great strides. We have, we've made great strides. However, only 2% of the US sponsorship dollar in America goes to women. In elites, goes to women, 2%, right? The rest goes to men. Here in the UK, 1,000 women earn their living from sport. 11,000 men earn their living from sport. So women already have this tiny piece of the cake. And now we're being told we're not even entitled to fair sport. So mediocre male athletes who can't make it in men's sport are identifying into women's sport and taking away those tiny chances that we have to actually have a platform to create a career. You couldn't write this stuff. I mean, honestly, if someone had told me this was going to happen 10 years ago, I would have just laughed in your face. I mean, I really would have done.
Sorry, Caroline.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, this is how a lot of women at a young age develop confidence. This is how they develop a sense of self-esteem with their peers. They learn a new skill and they master it. And it's amazing, this competition, to be able to practice that at a young age and to have it stripped from you because of some farce of gender inclusion, which is the new sacred cow of Western civilization, it's truly dystopian.
Yeah, no, exactly that. Just one final point from both of you here. For Caroline, for you, and thank you very much indeed for joining. Are we going to get to a stage here that you're going to find at a time where you need the next generation for all sorts of reasons to embrace sport, to enjoy sport, but also, if they're good at it, to believe that is a way forward for them as individuals without this worry that it could be at any stage of their development, if we don't watch it, something terrible can happen because they were up against a trans woman?
Well, this is the scary part, and I think more cases are materializing in which a female athlete is on a team, or maybe she's in a solo sport. She doesn't know she's going up against a man because maybe they've disguised it quite well, or the governing body didn't bother to inform her. And so she doesn't really have adequate time to, first of all, prepare, but really respond or give her consent. And so in terms of the generational divide, I think Sharron would agree with me that there has to be the older generation of coaches, of Olympians, of athletes from whatever level intervening in this conversation and saying, this is absurd. These are young women, and we need advocates that are adults, because these girls don't have them right now. And sadly, it's the ones they least expected it to betray them.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, that Caroline makes a really good point, actually, with the coaches, you know, and actually with World Aquatics, it was the Coaches Association who put a lot of pressure on World Aquatics to do the right thing. But unfortunately, a lot of these sports don't have coaches associations. For example, track and field doesn't. You know, you'd have thought that one of the biggest Olympic sports would have a fantastic coaches association where they could all come together and exert pressure. They don't. They're all very individual. So we're very grateful, you know, to that World Coaches Association, who work every single day with the athletes and know what the difference between a male and female performance is, and was prepared to stand up for their female athletes. But, you know, thought the governing bodies would do that. That is their job. And I'm just so disheartened that here we are 40 years after the whole East German debacle, and we're back to square one again, where women's sport is just disposable.
But we will have to continue with people like yourselves to police this and make sure that they're continually found out for what they're trying to destroy. Caroline.
Yes, and I do think class action suits are coming. There's plenty of litigation in the United States that's ongoing right now or pending concerning plaintiffs, women who say that they were not only denied equal fair competition in their sports, but maybe they suffered other harm. They suffered reputational harm, or they were ostracized by the authorities who were supposed to be on their side defending their right to compete. And so I really think this has to end at the top, which I think is the Supreme Court. And we've seen with Riley Gaines, who really has been the kind of antithesis to the Leah Thomas. She's been the spokeswoman on this issue, a swimmer like yourself, Sharron, and she's pointed out not only the biological differences that should be obvious to anyone, but apparently now need to be explained in scientific language, what differentiates the sexes, but also, this is becoming, this is encroaching into every sport. I mean, ballet, badminton, disc golf, it's everywhere. Yeah. And if we don't draw a line in the sand now, it will have progressed too far. So,
Caroline, thank you very much indeed. Sharron, just under a minute for you to sum up and know that people like us here want to be part of this going forward and raise it at every opportunity.
Thank you. I'm just going to read you one line here, which is from the Equality Act of 2010. S 195 is the clause. Covers all levels of sports, game and activity where one sex has a physical advantage over another. That is written in law in the UK. There is no way that any sporting body is going to lose in court if they protect a female category. And that is what I find so depressing, is that the law at the moment in this country does protect the ability to segregate and have female-only sport, and the governing bodies are choosing to protect and give the opportunity to transgender identifying men over females.